All right, so as I said at the end of last lecture, it kind of seemed to me when I was going over what we've been talking about that in a way we've been talking about some pretty dark topics in terms of conformity in general and submission to authority and the way context can make good people do evil things, and then of course prejudice. So I thought that's not all. I don't want to give you the impression that social psychology is all about understanding the sort of negative aspects of humanity. Social psychologists are also interested in the more positive aspects of social interaction. And so I thought I would end with one good example of that, which is the psychology of attraction. Maybe this will help you find that person in your life that you're looking for, or hopefully you already have them. So maybe it'll make you appreciate the person you did find a little bit more. Whatever. Let's get into it. Attraction. All right. So week 6, lecture 8, last lecture of the 6th week. Wow, time flies, isn't it? All right. I'm going to talk about a few different topics. They're going to seem a little unrelated. I mean, they're all related to attraction, but we're going to bounce around a little bit today. But I think that's okay. I want to start with this. We often worry about the first impressions we make. So let's say we've got up the courage and asked somebody out for a date. Well, we've probably already interacted with them a little bit by then, but imagine a situation where you haven't really had that much interaction with a person. Now you're going to go pick them up for the date, and you worry about things like, what do I wear, and do I wash my car, and what are the first words I want to say to this person, how am I going to behave, etc., etc. And so we have this impression that first impressions, the very first things we do, might set the tone for the rest of the interaction. And there has been, in fact, some psychological research on that, which suggests we are right to worry. A lot of this work was also done by Ash, the same guy that did the conformity work. And he did some very simple experiments that still make a pretty powerful point. He would describe people to someone. So he would have these images, not images like this, but just much more like a headshot of somebody where you'd see somebody's face and you would be told certain things about them. Now he would control the situation so that half the subjects would see this guy in one condition and half would see him in another condition. So I'm going to call those the positive first versus the positive last conditions. And they would see all these people, and then afterwards they would be shown the pictures again, and they would be asked, how much do you like this person? Okay. But now when they were originally shown the pictures, they were always shown the same 4 adjectives. Not always these 4 adjectives, but across these critical manipulations. So imagine one person saw this individual, just his face again, and they were told, this guy is intelligent, friendly, unfashionable, and boring. Now that's probably why you just want the headshot, because to me he looks pretty fashionable. But with just a headshot, these are what you're told about this person. Or you're told they are boring, unfashionable, friendly, and intelligent. Now note that these are the same adjectives, but one group is given the positive sounding ones first, followed by the not positive ones. The other group is shown the not positive, so boring, unfashionable, followed by the positive. But it's the same adjectives. But sure enough, you find that when you later say, hey, how much do you like this guy? The people who saw the friendly adjectives first like him better. Okay? So those first little bits of information you get about somebody really do set the tone, really do make us kind of come on a certain path of a conception we're going to form of that person. So be worried. First impressions are important. They're important when you're dating. They're important when you're interviewing for jobs. They're important, really in any of these contexts in life where we come into contact with someone who currently has no information about us. And sure enough, we would like them to hear positive things or see positive things first. Okay, one little tidbit. This is another really cool thing because it's really related to our notion of beauty. So obviously we're more attracted to beautiful people. This is, by the way, itself a very fascinating point. I could digress a little bit, but many animals in the animal kingdom, the way sexual attraction especially works, which is sort of all there is to the animal kingdom to some extent, is that the female of the species tends to go into heat at various times. And when she goes into heat, She emits all sorts of odors and other visual cues that tell the male she's in heat. And at that point in time, every male in the vicinity wants to mate with that female. There is no real notion in the animal community that, yeah, no, she's kind of ugly, I'm not interested in that, but oh, she's a hot one over there. Animals don't seem to have that sense of attraction based on beauty, based on physical characteristics. We do. And in fact, some evolutionary psychologists think that the reason we do is really related to our sort of bipedal nature and the fact that when we are on 2 feet, women can now carry multiple children, but then they need a male that's going to be there for them to support the family, which means you need a long-term connection between a male and female. And you can't just do this animal kingdom. She's in heat, I'll mate with her, and then I'll leave. You want something that holds males and females together. And the notion is that our attraction to beauty is part of that story. But then that raises the question, what is beauty? What attracts us to people? Now, at some level, you might think it's exoticism. It's somebody who's got something that other people don't have, something interesting. In fact, that tends not to be what is true. There's a website, I've got a link to it at the end, that you can play with, where they give you a bunch of faces of people, just as you see here, and then you can select some people. And what this website will do was produce a face that is a morph, an averaging of the features of the people you select. In studies that have done this, the results have showed that humans like averaged faces. Okay, that they find them more beautiful. The more faces you average together, the more beautiful the resulting face is judged to be. So exoticism doesn't seem to be what attracts us. It seems to be averageness of a sort. But what is averageness? What is really going on under here? Well, the claim is that we all have these asymmetries in our face. In fact, an interesting thing to do if you have the ability is to take a picture of your face, cut yourself right down the middle, flip the left so that you have a face made up of 2 of your left faces and another face with 2 of your right faces. And when you look at those 2 faces, you'll see they're quite different. Most of us are asymmetrical, both this way, well, and obviously this way. We have a mouth on the bottom and eyes on the top. But we have, if you think on the midline, we have an asymmetry to us. But if you average faces a lot, the result you get is a relatively symmetrical face. So you're still seeing some asymmetry in this face, but the more you average, the more symmetrical it becomes. And it turns out we seem to really be attracted to symmetry. Not only in the faces, by the way, but also in the rest of the body. We like nice, symmetrical bodies and faces. They look beautiful to us. They look artistic, I guess you could say. And so you can play with this yourself. And again, I'll give you the link. In fact, if you look at some people like this guy, Brad Pitt, that most people think of as attractive, he does have a very symmetrical face. If you actually, so you've seen somebody's overlaid some polygons and stuff on his face, the point they're trying to make is, like, even look at his forehead, that if you kind of cut it up, you see, very symmetrical on the left and the right. Everything seems to be mirrored. Every shape you see on one side, you see a counter shape on the other side that seems to fit quite well. And this was computer generated. This wasn't created to be this way. It's just these are the lines of maximal information that were connected to produce these shapes. And so a lot of the people that we view as beautiful show this symmetry. Kind of cool. I don't know what that says, but it's interesting. All right, so beauty is not exotic. Beauty is average, but average is symmetrical, and we like that. All right. Now here's another really cool one. I like this one for a number of reasons. It's hard to see here, but let me give you the study. So studies were done where people see one or the other of an image of an individual, but they're going to see a whole bunch of individuals. Some of the images they see, the individual has larger pupils. Okay, so this version of the picture actually has larger pupils than this version. It's not that easy to see on the main ones. I mean, you can see it, but especially in the blow-ups underneath, where you see we've blown up the eyes. And now, so this one has small pupils, but the other one has larger pupils. When people are shown these pictures, they find more attractive the images of people with larger pupils. And this is like true of everyone. A male will find even males more attractive if the males have larger pupils, females with females, etc. We like large pupils. Why? Well, in fact, there's a famous story of Cleopatra. Cleopatra actually seemed to know this at some level. She would put something in her eye called belladonna, a plant. Not a good idea. It's not a good thing to do long term, but it makes your pupils bigger. Kind of like when you go to the eye doctor and they put those drops and it makes your pupils bigger. And of course, Cleopatra was known as, the most beautiful woman of the realm at the time. So she seemed to know that link. What is causing that? Well, here's the fascinating story that's usually told. If you find something in your environment fascinating and you really are interested in it, you tend to look at it more closely and your pupils tend to increase. They allow more light into your eye so you can see whatever it is you're looking at better. So interest increases the size of the pupil. So now imagine you're speaking with somebody, you're interacting with somebody, you're trying your best to be interesting and engaging and charming and all that kind of stuff. If their pupils open up, if their pupils are large, that suggests they're interested in you. They're interested in what you're saying. They enjoy looking at you. And the reciprocal seems to be, we can see that. We see that in their pupils, and we like people who like us. Now, of course, we're not doing this consciously. A lot of our ability to read nonverbal behavior, which maybe that'll be one of the topics for week 8, I think. But a lot of our ability to do that is not conscious. It's just, we just kind of feel like, hey, that person kind of likes us. But we like people who like us. Not surprising so much. And so that seems to be what people think is happening here, that when we see images of people with big pupils, we get the feeling that these people like us more, and we like them more for that reason. Cool. I don't know how you'd use this in everyday life. I would not recommend putting belladonna in your eye. Not a real good idea. Okay, finally, let's get a little more, not really controversial, but a little more sexual, I guess. There's another kind of interesting result in the literature, which is, if you ask, this is especially true if you're asking men to judge the bodies of women. There is a reciprocal version, I'll come back to that, but it's not quite as strong. But if you ask men to judge the bodies of women and to tell you what body shape they find most attractive, and if you do this across cultures, so you're trying not to get to any cultural idea of the most beautiful body, but something that goes beyond cultures, you find that by and large, men are attracted to women whose waists, well, let me say it this way, whose waist is 7/10 the size of their hips. Now notice, this isn't saying that they're thin or large. Irrespective of their overall body size, men are attracted to women who have hips that are wider than their waist, and specifically this ratio, a waist that's 7/10 as large as their hips. You can all go measure yourself now and find out how close you are to that. Why? We talk about this hourglass figure, but why are men attracted to that figure? How did that evolve? Well, the story is that in fact, when you look at women who have this proportion, they tend to have all sorts of health benefits. Lower cholesterol, lower heart problems, lower rates of cancer, I believe, all sorts of health benefits, and perhaps the most critical one, in times when childbirth was not done with the aid of hospitals, women with this ratio tended to survive childbirth, and their children tended to survive childbirth at a higher rate. So there was something about this body style that supported childbearing. And so therefore, the story you can tell is that, well, maybe there was a time when men were interested in women of all different proportions, but those who liked these women, who liked the 7/10 ratio, they were more likely to end up having healthy children, and more healthy children. And those healthy children would inherit that liking of this body style. And so that generation after generation after generation, what we'd end up with is this just being sort of rooted in our DNA, literally, that's the body ratio we find attractive. Now, that's a gain. Men, especially. There are similar numbers with respect to women in the sense that women, it's sometimes more about the shoulder to the waist and that kind of thing. But there's certainly a body style that women find more attractive, and it's, not surprising it would be more of an athletic style, more of a strength kind of body, which again has a lot of good evolutionary reasons that. If you're going to be bearing children, that's a lot of work. I mean, I've seen firsthand what new mothers go through. It's a lot of work, a lot of time spent caring for the child early in the years. And so it's very advantageous to have a father in the picture who's strong, able to provide both food, but also security, literally. And so it seems that women have evolved a natural attraction towards strong men. Now, notice that both of these, this is the kind of funny thing, in the modern world, to some extent, both of these are now irrelevant. A weak man can provide just as well as a strong man can nowadays, especially if that weak man is intellectually strong and is successful. If they can produce a lot of money, then they can give you security, they can give you all the food you need. That does no longer depend on their physical stature. And similarly, when it comes to childbirth, thanks to, I guess you'd say, modern hospitals, modern medicine, virtually every woman has a very high probability of surviving childbirth, and so does her child. And so, in a modern world, these pressures are no longer there. And yet, there's this notion of what's sometimes called a proximate cause in evolution, the idea that we still carry these leftovers of evolution with us. And as long as they aren't causing harm, they don't disappear. And then the best example I give for that one, which I love, is here's something to mess your head up tonight. Why do men have nipples? Simple question. They're not good for anything. They're kind of useless. The evolution story says, yeah, they're useless, but they're not a problem either. They don't cause any sort of negative thing. There's no reason why a man, let's say a man was born without nipples, would he suddenly have a survival advantage? Would he be viewed somehow as more attractive? If he was, then there could be a chance for that evolution change to kind of flow through. But apparently, that hasn't happened. And so sometimes things that evolved long, long ago, and the assumption would be, this is something about men and women co-evolving, because nipples are, by the way, handy for women, so I hear, at least, that somehow when we co-evolved, the men had the nipples as well, and there was no reason to lose them. And they also like women with this ratio, and women also like strong men, and those things hang with us. Okay, kind of cool. All right, so I've given you a taste of a few things. Let's just do a quick review here. First impressions matter. Symmetry matters. We find symmetrical faces and bodies more attractive. Big eyes matter. And I guess the last point I want to make about this is it's one thing to just say we like people with big eyes, but it's also if we imagine we're in that, we talk about feeling the chemistry between two people, that's probably a little bit what we mean. We're reading some of this nonverbal stuff, and we're getting the sense that, hey, we're compatible. He likes me. I like him. So that's in the eyes. And waist to hip ratio, physicality, that stuff matters as well. All right, so a little bit more for you to follow up on. Here's some of those experiments about first impressions. You can check that out. This is a general discussion of why sexy is sexy, so it'll kind of connect some of the things we talked about and maybe bring in some others as well. Here's that software that you can play around with. You can go through this little project. I think it's made for kids or something, younger age, but still, whatever. It's cool. It works. That's fine. And then here's a Psychology Today article about attraction as well. A little more pop reading, but again, a nice carry on for this. So here we are, the end of week 6, 3/4 of the way through the course, home stretch yet to come. Week 7 will all be about clinical issues, so I think you'll find that really interesting, mental disorders, that kind of thing. And week 8, it's just going to be a greatest hits for me. I'm going to have 8 lectures to talk about things that I think are cool and that I couldn't really fit anywhere else. And I think nonverbal communication will be one of those. I think sleep dreaming will be one of those, and I'll think of a bunch of other ones to bring in too. So that's the roadmap ahead. I hope you stay with me. You've stayed with me this far. I thank you for that. See you next week.